Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the Lorden Arts channel. I'm John Lorden, and today we are doing case updates. We've got updates on 3 cases we've covered here previously on the channel. We're going to do an update on the Lauren Cho, also known as Elle, missing persons case, as well as the Jonathan Gerrish and Ellen Chung, the family that went hiking, all of them found dead. We've got some updates on that case as well, but we're going to start with this. Did You Hurt Mom? The Angela Green story. Of course, I'll have links to all the original episodes in the description box down below. This one really grabbed at my heart because you had the daughter, Ellie, really grappling with the reality of, is her father responsible for her mother's disappearance? I was very fortunate to actually talk to Ellie directly over on the Profiling Evil channel, hosted by Mike King. Of course, I'll have a link to that down below as well. What's the update on this case? I think they're taking the next best step that they can. Over here at fox4kc.com, the family of Green says they are considering a wrongful death suit against her husband, Jeff Green. He was the last person known to have seen her. She disappeared in June of 2019. She wasn't reported missing until her daughter, Ellie, realized something was wrong the following February. Ellie says her father told her that Angela died of a stroke in an unknown Kansas hospital. Ellie went on a whole heartbreaking adventure trying to verify this information to find out if her father was being honest with her or not. She never could verify these bizarre stories that she was hearing from her father. It looks like now, even if they can't get it in a criminal court, they're going to try to put it in a courtroom, see if they can make him answer some questions, or maybe some new information will come out through this investigation. Maybe that'll help the criminal investigation. Quote, "It's tough to see him be put in a place where he could be responsible for my mom's death, but at the same time, justice needs to be served, and he needs to answer questions," Ellie said. According to Prairie Village Police Chief, Jeff Green only spoke with them on the day that Angela was reported missing. His lawyer maintains his client has no comment about the case and is not facing criminal charges. In the past year, the Prairie Village Police Department executed 3 search warrants in the case, one at the family's home, another at a storage property, and then a third at the family's second home in Lawrence. So I think considering him a person of interest is very easy to do when you see how they're kind of running these search warrants and checking all the properties that essentially he has access to. Ellie is graduating from Colorado State University with a degree in journalism this December. She says while mounting a civil suit is hard, she knows her mother is proud of her wherever she may be. And I know I got to say this to Ellie, but I wanted to share it with you guys. Watch what Ellie does with this life, having to deal with a tragedy of this nature, getting her education, and for it to be in journalism. I think that we're going to see a lot of good come from the heartbreak that Ellie's going through at this point. Quote, "I'm still trying to make something of my life and make my mom proud as well." On to our next update about the Jonathan Gerrish and Ellen Chung family killed on hike. Prime suspect, Mother Nature. Now, we did an update a few weeks ago about a new consideration. It was still Mother Nature, but essentially it was lightning possibly responsible for what happened to them? We finally have some answers to those questions, but we still don't have the big answer to the biggest question. What happened? What has actually ended the life of this family and their dog, all seemingly in a very close location on this hike they were going out on? Over at newser.com, lightning didn't kill family who mysteriously died on hike. A family that died on a hike in California Sierra National Forest in August did not die by lightning strike, by any weapon, illegal drugs or alcohol, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, cyanide exposure, or by suicide, investigators publicly concluded. So not only did they answer the lightning strike question, they threw out a bunch of other things that they were looking into. Those have all been removed now as well. It's really mind-boggling what's going on with this case. What did kill Ellen Chung, 31 years old, Jonathan Gerrish, 45, their 1-year-old daughter, Miju, and their dog, Oski, remains a mystery. almost, here they're saying 7 weeks. It's more like 8 or 9 weeks now at this point after their death. And there still isn't new information. If you remember the previous episodes, we're waiting on toxicology results. We were waiting on autopsies. The autopsies really didn't show anything. Then there was information, well, maybe we'll learn something from Oski, the dog's autopsy. Nothing really came out of that. Then it was, well, we're going to wait for these further toxicology tests. Some of these things obviously probably figured out from toxicology, carbon monoxide poisoning, carbon dioxide poisoning. So pretty interesting. We're seeing all these things kind of omitted, but what's left in consideration here? Well, over at the Daily Beast, toxic algae and heat. It was between 107 and 109 degrees that day. These are the two possibilities that authorities have not yet ruled out. And I've struggled with, heat exposure was kind of brought up early. I know Gray Hughes mentioned it to me on a live stream I was doing. I've spoken to friends and family about the heat exposure aspect. There's one thing that gets us about it, and I'll get to that. But first, there's some other information that I'm seeing, I believe it's in the San Francisco Chronicle, that's actually changing my mind a little bit about the amount of exposure they experienced out there. In the original reporting, I was finding there was all kinds of conflicting information about where their car was parked. There was literally maps showing it parked at an incorrect location. But we had figured out, okay, we know that it was parked close to this particular this line of switchbacks that you could see down here, the Savage Lundy Trail. And I thought, well, if they parked their car there, they probably just went out on these switchbacks, got to where they met up with the Merced River, turned around, and then came back. That should have been about, 5-mile round trip, something like that. Information I'm seeing from the San Francisco Chronicle, they're really strongly running with the assumption that they actually did an entire hoop, including the Heights Cove Trail, and that was probably more like about 8 miles that they were into at the location they were found. So if you imagine they parked their car down here and then went north immediately from there on the Heights Cove Trail, met up with the South Fork of the Merced River, they would essentially be riding along the river. The trail you can see is right next to the river, all the way down to the Devil's Gulch area where they eventually meet up with that other trail to get back to their car. A lot more water exposure here, but a lot more exposure in general. And keep in mind, this is an area where there had been fires that had taken out a lot of the foliage. So on a hot day like that, even if you are looking for shade, probably a little tough to find. But let's learn just a little bit more about what happens to the body if you're dealing with extreme heat. The body normally cools itself by sweating, but under some conditions, sweating just isn't enough. In such cases, a person's body temperature rises rapidly. Very high body temperatures may damage the brain or other vital organs. And this is information coming directly from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control at cdc.gov. Who's at the greatest risk? Now, this is where the questions start to kind of pop up for me in this particular theory. Those at the greatest risk include infants, which we know we do have an infant casualty here, children up to 4 years of age, or people 65 years of age and older who are overweight and people who are ill or on certain medications. Now, what strikes me about that is Jonathan and Ellen, I don't think they're overweight. They're not outside on the fringes of these age ranges that we're looking at for people that are really at high risk here. And we still have this very bizarre consideration. 3 people died at the same location and a dog as well. We've got kind of different physiologies being affected by whatever happened, all in a very short, seemingly short time frame. So that's why I'm still struggling with the heat aspect, but there's things to struggle with the toxic algae aspect as well. We're going to get to those next. Just kind of round this out. What are the warning signs of heat stroke? Extremely high body temperature, red, hot, and dry skin, no sweating, rapid, strong pulse, throbbing headache, dizziness, nausea, confusion, unconsciousness. That's another thing. They're pretty much found on the trail from what we understand from the details that have been publicly released. If there was confusion and that, would they necessarily be found on the trail? I don't know. But the biggest thing for me is just thinking of this localization of how they're all found. And heat stroke, the way that it would be affecting them, I think it would be affecting each of them differently. Sounds like the baby would be the most susceptible first. But honestly, John and Ellen, I don't know. I just don't know that it would affect them like that. And from what I hear, dogs can even weather temperatures like that much better than humans can. So struggling on that front. But let's see if the San Francisco Gate can give us any more information. What about this toxic algae thing? The thing that's been talked about from the start of this. Is it reasonable to think that that's still in play here? Is there some reason why it might be in play and might be extremely hard to prove? This very good article that they put together here. Let's look at some points. At this point, there have been no confirmed reports of humans dying from toxic algae. This is something I looked into back in the original coverage. I couldn't find any instances. Here we have another reporter that has gone looking, can't find any confirmed instances. Sierra National Forest had posted a warning sign about toxic algae at the Savage Lundy Trailhead in June. Since the family died, additional tests have confirmed that dangerous antitoxins from the algae, more accurately called cyanobacteria, are present in the Merced River near the trail. So we've got potential for something, it seems like more that could make them not feel well, make them ill, something along those lines. I mean, if we've got no confirmed deaths from this. But let's hear from an expert. Taylor Weiss, an assistant professor in environmental and resource management at the Polytechnic School at Arizona State University, did his PhD on algae. He's been studying it since he was 6 years old. Not all algae, which are essential plants that photosynthesize and live in water, are harmful. In fact, most types of algae aren't. Weiss says, and it's just really a few kinds that can bloom quickly and produce toxins that are dangerous to people and animals. Cyanobacteria is the most common of these. The first documented case of harmful algae bloom took place in the 1600s in Poland when dogs, cattle, and birds died after drinking from a lake that exhibited a hairy efflorescence. Then in the 1870s, after livestock began to die near a lake in Australia, a man named George Francis published the first ever report about the algae's lethal effects in the journal Nature. Now, I know that these instances you're hearing, you're like, John, we're talking about stuff from the 1600s and then 1800s. Like, is it this rare? According to other information that comes out much later in this article, it's not rare for people to be affected by it. As a matter of fact, it seems like there's a trend over the past 3 or 4 years where more and more cases are being identified as toxic algae cases. But essentially, it's people that aren't feeling well. It's nothing that goes to this extreme where all of a sudden a family has been wiped out. Last year in Botswana, 356 elephants died near watering holes, and officials concluded that the creatures had ingested toxins from a bloom. It works the exact same way as VX gas, Weiss said, referring to an extremely toxic compound developed for chemical warfare. It inhibits your ability to fire your neurons to control your musculature, and that leads to paralysis. And essentially, at that point, you're going to have trouble breathing. You can't move from where you are. It just, considering that factor of how we find them all clustered together, it just seems like that is a really strong possibility with this case. Once again, no reported human deaths from toxic algae, and that is largely due to the fact that adults do not often swallow large amounts of polluted water. Antitoxin also breaks down fairly quickly and easily. It doesn't stay in tissues very long, according to Weiss. For that reason, he says, he'll be surprised if antitoxins show up in the toxicology reports for Gerrish and Chung. So looking at this type of case, looking at how long it's been in terms of waiting for this information, and from what I understand, toxicology reports could take up to several months, depending on what is going on with them. So we're still in the range where it wouldn't be absurd that in a few weeks or a month from now, an official report is released and there's more details in it. But according to this expert, he'd be very surprised if they were able to identify if it actually was those toxic algae blooms that affected this family. Even if you had extreme confidence that they had been poisoned, finding evidence of that poisoning will be very challenging, he says. Are there other ways the family could have been exposed? Well, if you're near splashing water like rapids or something like that, and you're getting spray on you or there's a mist in the air, that can convey it, he says. Now, I think that's interesting when you combine that with this new information, and I can't really tell if it's more accurate or not, but the possibility that they did this whole route, went up, and they were essentially walking next to the river for a very long stretch of this hike. Is there some more possibility? Their potential for exposure is certainly higher than if they were just doing this little out and back trail, kind of getting to some water, turning around and coming back. I mean, for almost half this hike, they're essentially walking next to the river. So I think that's kind of an important aspect to this as well. Did the dog go into the water and come back? Did they pet the dog? The parents are probably holding the child, and the dermal tolerance is not that high. Once you get it on your body, it's likely to make its way into your body, and they were sweating a lot that day, I'm sure. According to Mariposa County Sheriff's Office spokesperson Christy Mitchell, results from several toxicology reports, including a test of the water found in the family's Camelback, are still pending, and a time frame for those becoming public is still not known. You guys might have seen the ads that have been running all over this. Here they are. I was looking into Camelbacks because I was trying to get a sense of how much water they might have taken with them. There's all kinds of different sizes, and we don't know which pack that they were wearing. They kind of range from, like, you know, in the 25 ounce all the way up to, it seems like 100 ounce is kind of one of the bigger ones that you'd be wearing on your back. We don't know exactly what size they were wearing. I was just trying to learn that to see if we could gauge maybe what route they had taken, or if there was any potential that they would have had to refill it anywhere along there, but I don't have enough information. One additional detail that does come out here, though, SF Gate asked Mitchell whether a filter was discovered in the family's belongings, because essentially the experts are saying you can't filter this stuff out. And I don't know if you've seen, but they have these filters that effectively look like really big, thick straws, and you can put them in natural water sources, suck through that straw, and it's filtering the water as it's coming in. By the time it hits your mouth, it has been cleaned. So they asked, was one of these found with the family? And she told them no. So it doesn't seem like they were using any type of filtration system like that. It wouldn't have helped even if they were, but that might lead us to believe that, well, maybe they had ingested it directly if they were using a filter like that. So where is it at now? Over at sftimes.com. To move closer to the solution of the case, detectives are doing the work with an environmental specialist, toxicologist, as well as the FBI. They've gathered water samples. We know that they've been looking at those samples they've taken multiple times at this point. Several toxicology reports were already returned, the sheriff's office said, but it's not time yet to reveal its contents. A number of key results are yet to be received, officials added, while no timeline is given on the report's availability. Quote, "We respect and understand the need for information and details regarding this case." I just want to highlight that. This case seems like it's a matter of public concern. This, you know, we look into a lot of things on this channel where it's, you can kind of imagine it as, I guess, like a closed instance, some type of thing that happens between two people or something like this. This is a family that went out for a hike, and it might be an environmental element that ended their lives. So I'm glad that they're pointing that out. There is certainly a need, and that's part of the reason why I'm trying to keep this story in the forefront as well. I'm waiting for these answers so I can share them with all of you. And if this is something we have to raise exposure to, let's get that exposure raised. At this point, something took out this family, and it's to think that it's kind of fallen to the wayside a little bit in terms of the media and the press. And I'm not trying to take away from other cases that are certainly needing that attention as well. Guys, I still can't believe that Brian Laundrie hasn't been located yet, and some of the nonsense that's going on around all that is really heartbreaking. But I don't want to forget about Jonathan and Ellen and their family. I want to make sure that we stay on this as well. So I'm going to keep doing these updates until we have some type of definitive answer on this. Back to the quote. "Our current priorities remain supporting and informing the Gerrish Chung family during this tragic time. As we navigate through this investigation with the family, we will later share our findings with the public," said Mariposa County Sheriff Jeremy Brees in a press release. So that's kind of officially where it's all at on that case right now. Now, we do have one last development to speak of, and that is in the Lauren Cho, also known as L case. A woman missing from Morongo Valley, California since June 28th, 2021. We have another one of those cases where remains have been found, but we don't have a confirmation yet. Let's take a look. This is a post put out by the Morongo Basin Sheriff's Department. On Saturday, October 9th, 2021, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department conducted an additional search and rescue operation in the ongoing search for Lauren Cho, who was reported missing on June 28th, 2021. During the search, unidentified human remains were located in the rugged terrain of the open desert of Yucca Valley. The remains were transported to the San Bernardino County Coroner's Division, where staff will work to identify the remains and determine a cause of death. The identification process could take several weeks. No further information will be released until the identity of the deceased has been confirmed. Now, I just want to note this as a side note. There was a development like this in the Lauren DeMolo case that we also covered here on the channel. I didn't report on that because it turns out remains were located. They were kind of talking about it like they thought it was Lauren. They were asking for dental records. They got the dental records and it wasn't Lauren. Now, in this case, we know what Elle was wearing. In particular, we know about the boots that she had. And it's kind of curious to me that we don't have some form of communication about, like, you know, we found these items with the remains. We really think it might be Lauren. There's a Facebook page. We're not seeing comments over on the Facebook page about, you know, sometimes in instances like this, the family will just come out and say, we were contacted by law enforcement. We know that it's not official yet, but we're fairly confident this is what's happening. We're not really seeing that in this instance either. So I just want to put a little bit of caution around this. And also be clear that the family is asking that people in the media not really try to hypothesize on what's going on with the remains at this point. I think that's a pretty smart call because we don't have this final confirmation. If a confirmation comes through, then yeah, a lot of questions come behind that. And, you know, even the comments that I'm seeing on the Facebook page, one of the big questions that has always been asked is, how did they miss her footprints out there? How did they miss those shoe prints? How did she go walking off? So there's a lot of big questions on the other side of the confirmation, but we're not exactly there yet. Over at CNN.com, Cho's sister tells CNN, the family is just holding our collective breaths. We so badly desire answers, but already feel the heartbreak of what the answer could be. Elle is many things: a talented musician, an incredible baker, a hilarious and loyal friend, a strangely intuitive gift giver, and probably the coolest sister one could hope for. We need answers, all of us, was one of the latest things posted over on their Facebook page. But they also posted something else, and I want to end today's episode with Lauren showing off one of her many talents that you heard about according to her family. This is just a little bit of a song that her sister filmed for her. There's even a cute story where her sister is saying, Lauren made me film this over and over and over to get it just right. I just want to share this with you guys to close out today's episode and send all of our best to the family as they're in this tough time waiting to find out these answers and see if they need to get to the next set of questions. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me here on today's update. We'll see you back here on the channel again very soon.
I'm living on my knees as I'm trying to make you see that you're everything I think I need here on the ground. But you're neither friend nor foe, but I can't seem to let you go. The one thing that I still know is you're keeping me down. You're keeping me down.